Hey guys, Kakarot197 again. This time with a review of the high-grade Universal Century Zaku 2 Commander type Char custom from the Mobile Suit Gundam anime series. Brought to you by my favorite online hobby store, Hobbylink Japan. Links to buy your own light red Commander mobile suit down below. It's been almost 2 decades since the release of the original high-grade Universal Century, and it was well worth the wait. With the use of modern gunpla technology, this kit completely blows the old one out of the water in every single aspect. Not only do we just get a single seam line on the arms and a single molding line in the middle of the left shoulder armor, but the proportions are so much better compared to the older, more goofy proportions. Especially the head, which I hated on the old one, is now way more badass. It feels modern, but in certain poses you can still feel that retro flair that this kit has. My only visual complaint is that when you look at it from the front, you can see the gap in the waist, making it feel less real. On the flip side though, it does give our new Zaku very good articulation. Color accuracy then is perfect, requiring only a single sticker for the mono eye, but unlike some other modern mono eye kits, the eye itself isn't molded into the plastic, so you can just put the sticker however you want. For me, this is definitely a benefit because usually I like to put the sticker a bit lower than you have to for a more cooler look in my opinion. So straight out of the box, we get an almost perfect Zaku. Or at least you do if you don't decide to use the flexible skirt armor, which can potentially leave you with some ugly nub marks in plain sight. But let's quickly forget about that and have a look at the accessories that this thing comes with. First up, we have a very nicely detailed heat hog, which has one kinda weird thing going on with it. According to the manual, it comes with this dedicated heat hog holding hand, which is actually significantly worse at holding onto the heat hog than the standard closed hands that he's got right now. You see, the thing is, on the inside here, it's all completely shaved away, while these hands actually have an extra little thingy poking out, which really grabs onto the heat hog, making for a solid connection, whereas this one still holds onto it, but is ever so slightly more flimsy. As you can see, it's already falling down. Take my advice, don't listen to the manual and stick with the normal holding hands. And if you don't want to use it, we again get a couple of options. We have a peg here, which will allow it to be stored on all 3 holes on the skirt armor, but that's not actually how the manual tells you to do it. Instead, we get this extra clip here, which goes into the hole and then clicks onto the heat hog. And this time, I do prefer it the manual way. Then next up, we get the Zaku machine gun, and this has the typical movable parts. We have a movable handle, we have a movable scope, we have a magazine that can be removed, and of course we also get a spare one, which can then be mounted onto the side skirts or onto the back skirt. And then one thing that you might be wondering about is that the holes on the shield look suspiciously like those pegs, but in fact they are not compatible, at least not without modification. To hook the machine gun up to the Zaku, then we have a peg on both the left and the right side, and we also get 2 trigger finger hands, and they also have the peg at a slight angle to make for more natural poses. One weird thing that you might not immediately notice is that the color of the hands is ever so slightly different. This is because the right trigger finger hand and both of the normal holding hands are part of the lighter joint runner, and the left trigger finger hand and the heat hog holding hand are part of the darker weapons runner. And then of course the final weapon that we're getting is the Zaku bazooka. This thing also has all of the normal movable things you'd expect, the secondary handle moves, the main handle moves, and the scope also goes up and down. Again, it's got pegs on both left and right sides, so you can hook it up to either arm. Just as with the scope of the machine gun, you'll also have to paint this scope pink, And I do find it unfortunate that they didn't just give it to us as a sticker, because it's not as if they were running out of space. They could have easily included that on the sticker sheet. It's also unfortunate that the back is hollow. And if you don't want to use the bazooka, you can always store it onto the back skirt, although I feel like that also makes it very likely to get toasted by the thrusters. But that's not our problem. The remaining accessories then are an open left hand for some really nice dynamic poses, the flexible skirt armor which we'll get into in a second, this connector to an action base that has a round peg, and these two leftover parts. And now you might be thinking, wait, can't I use this? Because this is the holder that we got with the high mobility types, where the bazooka and the machine gun clicks into, and then it slides onto the shield. And the thing is, since this bazooka and machine gun are the ones from the high mobility type, they do have the holes to click onto this thing, but because the shield is different, it doesn't actually go onto the shield anymore. So unfortunately, the kinda unsightly pegs on the bazooka and the machine gun serve no purpose on this thing whatsoever. So with all of the accessories out of the way, let's have a look at the amazing articulation that this thing has. Starting off with the head, we have a ball joint and hinge combo, and that ball joint already gives him quite some movement, but that hinge joint really puts it over the top. I think this is one of the only model kits that can look at his feet like that. The mono eye is surprisingly easy to rotate thanks to this big tab, but at the same time it also causes you to sometimes move the mono eye when rotating the head. The shoulders then are equally impressive. First of all, this thing pulls out with a ball joint for some really good movement, and then the shoulders themselves can also go forwards and backwards for some really impressive movement. The arms will of course also go up nicely. The shield is on a peg, will rotate around, and can also go a little bit outwards and inwards on a hinge joint, but it's of course hindered by its own design. Then the arms will rotate around below the shoulder and even at the elbow joint, which is amazing because you can then replicate those traditional Zaku poses. This of course means that we get a nice double joint all the way up, and then we have a pretty interesting ball joint right there. I say interesting because on paper it's a really cool thing to have, but in practice I noticed that it is much more of an inconvenience than anything else. Because the thing is, the hands are also, as always, on ball joint, will wiggle around, turn around, and do everything a ball joint does, but the ball joints of the hands are significantly more powerful than the ball joints of this, so what happens when I want to move the hands is that thing moves. And as you can see, it's not just a normal cylinder, it is in a specific shape, so that has to be down like that. Also, if you want to replace the hands, that happens. So I can see what they were going for, but it doesn't really give you that much extra articulation for the hassle that it gives you. Another disappointing ball joint can be found in the left shoulder armor, which doesn't move outwards quite enough to not limit the movement of the shoulder. And talking about articulation, we have some pretty good forwards and backwards movement for a Zaku. We'll also rotate around all the way on that ball joint, and of course goes sideways pretty far, again, for a Zaku. The front skirts are also in ball joints, and this time they're molded separately. The legs go forwards really far. The side skirts then are pretty interesting because rather than being connected to the waist, they're actually connected with a peg to the back skirt. So they go upwards really far, allowing the legs to also go sideways really far. Backwards then is a little bit limited, but still not too shabby. And this, of course, allows our Char Zaku 2 to do a perfect Char kick. And even though that articulation was already pretty impressive with the hard skirt armor, with the flexible skirt armor, things get even crazier. Forwards, really far. Backwards, equally ridiculously far. And even outwards gets ridiculously improved. It's just a shame that I'm not a huge fan of how it looks straight out of the box. Back with the hard type then, the legs will rotate around all the way. The knees then are on a double joint, and while they can go all the way, this pipe doesn't really appreciate that, so let's put that back like that and go to the feet. We get the usual hinge and ball joint combo for some nice forwards, backwards, side to side on another hinge, and then rotation. And then this thing here is actually on its own little ball joint. So in terms of articulation, this is a pretty impressive model kit. If you go with the hard skirt armor, it's already really good for a Zaku. It's got some really good chest movement, and it can pull basically any pose you'd want. And if you go with the flexible skirt armor, it becomes one of the most articulated Zakus of any grade, and perhaps even the best one, depending on which joints you prioritize. So as always, the inevitable question is, do you want to buy this? And at 1,600 yen, it's not the cheapest, the most detailed, or even the best bang for your buck Zaku out there. But it's definitely one of the most articulated ones out there. And in the sea of Zaku model kits, this is simply a great rendition of the original legend for a good price. It's definitely not without its flaws, but I still think that it's a worthy addition to any collection alongside the Revive RX-78 too. And perhaps you should also consider picking up an action base to show off that iconic Char kick. For size comparisons then, here it is next to the old high-grade Universal Century Char Zaku and the even older 08 MS Team version. I'm not gonna lie, to this day I still think the 08 MS Team's design is one of the best Zaku designs out there. Next up we have the Zaku 2 F2 and the Johnny Raiden High Mobility type. And honestly, when the high mobility types were being released, I was really expecting Bandai to release a regular Zaku 2 or a Char Zaku 2 using parts of them. But in the end, they made this thing completely new, only reusing the hands and the weapons. And then finally, here it is next to the standard size Gym Custom and the always bulky Zaku 3. I wonder if they'll revive the Zaku 3 in the near future, and if it would have similarly impressive articulation if they do. Anyways, that's all for this review, brought to you by Hobbling Japan. Links to buy your own down below. And as always, a big thank you to the Patreon supporters. I hope everyone watching has a great day, and I'll see you all next time.